Good afternoon, class. Wanted to pick up and carry forward where we left off today. I apologize. We had sort of a disjointed conversation in class, partly because I was having problems with some files that I had saved. The good news is I was able to recover the file, and it's the file that appears before you. And I'm going to try to uh, just briefly touch upon some of the things we talked about today, but then more importantly move on and cover the rest of what I'd hoped to get to today. So you recall our theme for today is transition, and one of the really important crossroads at which this world region, Russia and post-Soviet states, the crossroads that this world region finds itself at, is over the past 25 years it has been trying to undo what the previous 70 years of communist rule had done to the economy, to some degree to the society and culture of the people who inhabit Russia and post-Soviet states. So the theme here is transition, and a lot of that transition has been front and center and has been a defining reality of this world region over the past quarter century. I touched upon briefly the important events of the 20th century, World War II, the Cold War. Of course, if I'd gone back further, I would have talked about the Bolshevik Revolution, which was what brought communism and the command economy into focus for this world region, brought along the historic, very memorable rule of Joseph Stalin, who was a transformative figure in Russian and Soviet history, also a very controversial and tyrannical person as well. I showed you this map, which I will breeze through. And the first question that I asked you today is, where did that initial capital, when the Soviet Union formally ended in 1991, and now it was evident to pretty much everyone who was paying attention that an economic transition needed to happen. The question became, how do you take a command economy and turn it into a capitalist economy? And the question of capital, and some of you had an answer for this, and it's essentially that the capital or the means of production had been owned and run and operated and managed by the Soviet government and its bureaucracy. Well, now this is going to be undone, and the critical figures in this process become the oligarchs. And I say unique opportunity here because, as is oftentimes the case in a transition, sometimes those people who are there on the ground floor have the greatest opportunity to take advantage of circumstances. Many of these oligarchs were past bureaucrats of the Soviet power establishment, and so they had a pretty good understanding of where resources were coming from, how they were being moved from one place to another, how the government was managing and making decisions about what to produce and how to produce it. And so the oligarchs weren't necessarily incredible businessmen so much as they were at the right place at the right time. And in fact, the business school that forms shortly thereafter, the Skolkovo Business School, is somewhat ironic in the sense that these oligarchs were thought to maybe be, have something that they could teach in terms of business skill and practices, but it became pretty evident that the oligarchs were a unique and temporary phenomenon that really just spoke mostly to the transition. Okay, so the command economy, we talked a little bit about some of the challenges that the command economy, which was the economic system that was paired with the communist political philosophy, and we talked about challenges of efficiency and quality. We talked about the formation of black markets, that when people's needs weren't being met through the formal governmental channels of quota and distribution, sometimes people would take matters into their own hands and try to come upon goods that they sought by their own means. Also, regional development under the command economy was quite unique and interesting. Unlike in a capitalist system where people take on risk, usually people's risks, individuals' risks, are informed by common sense and a logic and a shrewd weighing of pros and cons and risks associated with it. In the case of Russia, oftentimes development decisions were being made by government bureaucrats, and so sometimes the patterns of development, where industries and enterprises were set up, did not necessarily have the same logic or predictability that you might expect in a capitalist or market economy. And of course, various rulers also used the process of Russification, where they would relocate ethnically Russian people from the West, the western part of the Soviet Union, and place them in strategic places across the Soviet Union, which had the consequence of sort of changing the ethnic identity, makeup, and character of certain parts of Russia and post-Soviet states. Surprisingly, throughout all this, the Soviets tended to be quite accomplished in things like science and technology. In some cases, they beat the United States to various accomplishments. Critical one being in 1957 when they launched Sputnik, the first orbiting satellite into space. This sent a shudder of fear throughout the United States and was largely the purpose or the inspiration for President John F. Kennedy's space race and throwing out the challenge that we would land someone on the moon by the end of the 1960s, which we wound up doing. Okay, you see here in this map, it sort of shows a little bit of the development plans as they developed under the command economy of the Soviet era. Oil and gas development. So, question, how are oil and natural gas a source of opportunity and challenge for this world region? Well, this is one of those unique opportunities, and I think it helps explain why Russia has had a bit of a resurgence. Over the past 15 years or so, Russia has been able to export its oil and its natural gas. And in fact, throughout the first decade of the 2000s, this was a real secret to the success of the Russian economy as it rebounded from its post-Cold War lull. And it probably explains a little bit the sort of sway and swagger in Vladimir Putin's step. This very important and valuable natural resource has served Russia's economic interests quite well, and it has placed it in many ways on par with some of its European equivalents. Gazprom is the Russian owned gas company. It is a very significant player in the global energy market. Your textbook says that it's the 10th highest exporter of oil and gas in the world, which is quite significant. And Gazprom and the natural resources of Russia, and to some degree other parts of this world region, like in Central Asia, and to a lesser degree the countries in the Caucasus. This has made the world region of Russian post-Soviet states very much a player in the considerations of other important parts of the world. The European Union has worked hard to maintain some sort of ties with Russia because of the role that Gazprom and Russian natural resources play in fueling and giving energy to the European Union and the economies of the various economies of the European Union. Of course, this is not without some problems. One challenge that Russia faces is that when global demand for resources like oil and natural gas change, it has a dramatic impact upon, in this case, the Russian economy. And also it could be in the economy of various states in Central Asia like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and likewise in some of the countries in the Caucasus, countries like Georgia and Azerbaijan, and then finally all the way over into Ukraine. Ukraine has been an important pipeline area linking this world region with other parts of it. So we see many parts of this world region, in some cases, engaged in a tug-of-war between Russia in the east and then Europe in the west. And this can be problematic because some of these countries that were former members of the Soviet Union may wish to be independent and free, but they've had a tough time finding their way out from under the influence of the very powerful country of Russia. And pipelines are the main network that unites these natural resources. But pipelines are also problematic because if you're shipping oil, you also have to make arrangements for passage rights of way through one country, and it may be that that country doesn't necessarily benefit because it isn't exporting the natural resource, or maybe it's only realizing a partial profit. Pipelines also pose some challenges. The Soviet Union had quite a legacy of pipelines that were in various states of repair, sometimes falling apart and polluting the natural environment of various parts of this world region. Here you see, if you just take a moment and look at this map, you'll see a very interesting and developed, intricate pipeline system. And you can see how various countries like those here in Central Asia are linked to the overall energy, the energy complex of this world region. It gets even more interesting over here as you look at the Caucasus and you see these pipelines moving, and they're moving through Ukraine on into Europe. And this very much spells out the relationship between this world region and that of Europe. Okay, transition relations with the European Union. So Russia, in one of its efforts to remain a relevant and important world power, has been engaged in a number of different activities and behaviors to call attention to their important role. One of those has come recently. Right here we have Dmitry Medvedev, who was the leader of Russia when Vladimir Putin took a brief term off, but now Vladimir Putin is back in control of Russia. Anyway, Russia has taken some steps to sometimes punish and modify the behavior of its European Union counterparts. One of the ways that Russia has sought to do this is by cutting off energy flows, cutting off those pipelines. So if the European Union does something that Russia finds objectionable, there have been recent cases where Russia has responded. They won't come right out and say it, but it's been very easily implied that if you don't play ball with us and play in a way that we like, we reserve the right to restrict energy supply to your European Union in this case. Other ways that Russia has sought to become a relevant player is by joining the Group of 8. Russia has been included in the Group of 8. These are the 8 most powerful economies in the world who oftentimes have important decisions that they make, and so Russia has enhanced its credentials and its credibility by being a part of that. A final way that Russia has sought to build power and significance and clout in the current world order is by forming a trade bloc known as BRIC, and BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These are kind of developing-ish countries that have determined that if the Europeans are going to form a European Union and the United States are going to form with Canada and Mexico into NAFTA, that then maybe they need to join forces so that they can provide a counterbalance to these powerful other regions of the world. Finally, I'm just going to show these slides of food production, physical geography. This world region has only 10% arable lands, and it's also gone through some interesting changes of late because it has privatized from government.